Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight, my very special guests are Randy Maugans and Emily Moyer of Off Planet Media. The conversation with Randy and Emily was wide-ranging as we discussed the construct of the reality we are all experiencing. And so, without further ado, here's the show with Emily and Randy. Well, folks, I have some great guests on tonight, as I always do, but these are two special guests from Off Planet Radio, and it is Randy Maugans and Emily Moyer. And I was on their show recently, and it's only fair to reciprocate and to talk to two folks that are really, really very good with regard to research and the depth of the stuff that they look at. So this is going to be a very fun show, and it's going to be very informative, and we're going to cover a lot of ground, maybe some ground that myself personally, haven't covered yet with guests, so I'm going to find this to be fascinating myself. Before we get started, Emily and Randy, what I do with guests who are first time to the show is to ask them just to give me a little background, the audience a little background on their journey in life. In other words, how did you get to where you're at today with regard to research? And maybe we could start with Emily first, ladies first.
All right. I don't know how much of a lady I am. Right? I've been accused of acting unladylike a few times. First of all, Mike, thanks for having us. It's great to be here. We really like you. We enjoyed the show we did with you. And as I get busier and busier, I have less and less time to watch stuff, but I still really enjoy listening to your shows. You have some really interesting stuff.
Thank you.
And I always enjoy them. So thank you for your contribution. And so my journey is, it's interesting because my journey to get to where I am actually very much involves Randy, even though we have only been working together for a couple of years. And, for me, my journey pretty much, I grew up here in Los Angeles with a very early start in the entertainment business and then in gymnastics, and was very dedicated to gymnastics for most of my life. And when that ended, I found myself very attracted to the underground dance music scene and began to have an awakening when things in my life started to kind of fall apart. And part of that awakening was the recognition of some mind control and things that had gone on in my life, and how all three of those things, the entertainment industry, gymnastics, and underground dance music, were actually perfect vectors for this other layer of experiences and control to sort of enter and be disguised as something else. And, so in my search to find information at first, and then my search to find answers about myself, one of the most important places I landed was at Off Planet Radio as a listener. I followed searching for information on Duncan O'Finian, who was, when I heard his story, it touched something inside of me that was a little more than, oh, this is an interesting story, or, oh, this is a crazy story. It was, oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Let's try and ignore it until we can't anymore. And then you have to kind of follow it to see where it goes. And I landed somehow on Off Planet Radio, which was then called Exotica, and found that Randy's interviews with Duncan were the most interesting and began to sort of unravel something for myself. And then I started listening to everything that he had done, and some of the stuff at first didn't feel like it related to me. Other stuff very much did. But Randy and I were sort of energetically intertwined long before we ever actually met and spoke. And when we did, it, I think fairly quickly became obvious to both of us that this was the path that we were supposed to be on, was to be working together. And so even though I'm now his co-host and producer, I'm also just still very much a fan of everything he's done in Off Planet Radio. And I can't imagine me doing anything other than what we're doing right now. It feels like I'm doing exactly what I was meant to be doing. So, yeah.
Now, Emily, you mentioned mind control. Now, are you saying that you were involved in a mind control program, or you believe you were?
Yeah. So, what started to happen for me is, my life fell apart in my early 30s in spectacular fashion, from somebody who had always been, relatively successful and good at things, even though I had a lot of inner turmoil. And sometimes when people's lives fall apart, that's when they start researching. Remember, we talked about that sort of with you when you were on our show. That's when they start researching. That's when they start figuring out that, like, oh, the path that I thought I was, supposed to be on maybe isn't the right one. And I started researching, and I got in, of course, I started where most people started, with 9/11 and chemtrails and stuff like that. And all those things mattered to me. But when I stumbled upon the MK Ultra thing, both simultaneously in my own research and in a class I happened to be taking when I had gone back to school for a bit, where it came up as a tangential subject. The class was about the sociology of drug use. There was like a ring, something, it jarred something loose for me that was not, oh, that's nuts. Why would the government be doing it? It was more like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Or like, why does this sound familiar, but they're describing it, but they're not exactly describing what I think it really is. And I researched for a long time and I just couldn't let that one go. Like I could sort of let the others, not that all these things are important to us, but the other ones weren't affecting me in such it wasn't causing like a level of, I don't even know what the word is. Like it was a simultaneous feeling of knowing there was something more related to it for me and also wanting to be in denial of that. And so it was a long time before I even allowed myself to consider that maybe part of the reason that I was so driven to look at this was because there was something there that I was connected to. And when it just got to a certain point, which was actually a ridiculously hilarious point, at that point, that I had all the markers. Like I was looking at other people's stories and, I was in the Hollywood as a child and I was in a movie called Rainbow about Judy Garland's life, right? And we all know about Wizard of Oz programming. Like, I'm not into that. I'm not into acting. Why was I in this movie? Like, I didn't have acting training or anything like that. Like, we used to do stuff when I was in gymnastics. We used to do this thing called Mousercise, which was like a Mickey Mouse club for athletes. So there was like the obvious markers, but then just when I was listening to people recount their stories, I'm like, that's like the exact same, kind of thing happened for me. And so at a certain point I got to where, okay, I can't deny this anymore. What am I going to do about it? Because I'm not dealing well with life and I'm the kind of person that I have to be able to talk about stuff. And, if I'm going to make it, because I was in a really dark point in my life, if I'm going to make it, I'm going to have to be able to talk about it. How am I going to do that? And I had to really find a way to pull myself together so that I could start talking about it. And one of the things I noticed, so I was, it was a little bit torturesome at first, but once I started talking about it, things started to come together for me in a way that they hadn't before, which to me was the best evidence that I was right about it. And fairly early on in my sort of speaking out about it, actually, through your show, I heard Elisa E. talking about some stuff that I had never shared with anybody. And it was, I'd heard her once before in something else and been like, oh, yeah, this is interesting. It's, it resonates with me a lot, but I wasn't quite ready yet. And then a little later, I heard her on your show. And actually, I reached out to you and you connected. I don't know if you remember that, but you connected, she and I. And when I've read her books and listened to some of her stories, and my stuff is not in any way as horrific as hers, but there was enough similar and common experiences that was really the first point where I was like, this is undeniable. It's undeniable now. Like I can't, although I was talking about it before then, sometimes I was even worried. And I think a lot of us who speak out at all are worried that, like, what if I'm wrong? Like, what if I just made this all up in my own head or whatever? But when the amount of almost exact same things and experiences that I'd had, and even certain kinds of, exact programmings and things like that, I was like, that was almost the hardest point for me. Reading her book was terrifying for me. I had to keep a trash can by my bed because I was throwing up from when I was reading her book. And anybody who's read her book knows it's horrifying, but I've read a lot of dark stuff. I've read a lot of other people's stories. The physical reaction that I was having to this, was both terrifying because I didn't want to believe some of these things were true, but also in some ways confirmation that I was on sort of the right path and to keep going with this. And, my life was a disaster 3 years ago. And as I've spoken about this and worked through my issues as they come up, my life is better now than it ever has been. And it's not perfect, but it's better because I've been able to talk about stuff and find that I'm not alone in this. I get lots of letters and notes and messages from other people who are like, I never heard anyone describe it the way you did. And I was always embarrassed to say that happened to me. A lot of these come from middle-aged or older women, older than me, who have been holding on to secrets their whole life that they never wanted to say because it sounded crazy. And I'm fortunately blessed with the I don't really care what anybody thinks of me thing. So I'll say some things that other people won't say and not be worried about what anybody thinks about me. And people, they might not want to say it out loud themselves to other people, but they've confessed it to me. And so, that I've been able to help myself and maybe, help some other people a little bit along the way has been very rewarding. And, on that chance that, I sometimes wonder, I've had this conversation with other people who've been through it before, that what if we're all wrong? Like, what is this? Like, what if we're all wrong and it's like a psychological operation on us? Even if that's the case, then that's still something. Whether, you know what I mean? Like, that's still something that is what is going on here, because, I'm a normal person. I go to work every day. I work hard. I exercise I run 35 miles a week. I go to gymnastics meets. I watch tennis on TV. I have friends and a family. And I was in total turmoil before. And as I've worked through this, and I've worked through it on my own and with other people who've been around me, who've been very helpful to me, including people like Randy and Elisa and whatever. And also I'm one of the few who's been fortunate enough to have a reasonably positive therapy experience. And I think some of that comes from the fact that I had a therapist that I'd been working with for various things since I was younger, and we'd never been able to work through my issues. And when I finally came to her with this, and I thought she was going to think I was crazy, she didn't. And actually, she's been very supportive and, expressed to me that this is, of all the things that we've been through, this is the thing that makes the most sense, because all of the other issues would be like I'd work through them and then two more would pop up in their place, and, on and on and on, because they weren't the real issue. And when we got to this issue, I've been able to work through things in a different way. And, so it's been sometimes it's hard and sometimes it's really frustrating and upsetting and difficult, but it's also been extremely rewarding to reclaim my mind and to, be able to talk about it and have people listen and share the experience with other people in a way that they can appreciate. And that has been helpful for me as well.
Okay, that's quite a story, Emily. And actually, now that you mention it, I do remember your email coming in and wanting to connect with Elisa. I do now, and I didn't know that was you.
Yeah.
But now I do, so.
Yeah.
And Randy, how about yourself? Were you born a researcher?
No, no, I was created as a researcher, which Emily will get that. But the answer is that there's a lot of reasons why people do what they do and why we wind up with these platforms to talk about things that clearly the mainstream media, which is so cliched and tired, will not address. And I discovered that I do what I do as self-discovery and as self-disclosure and as a means of pushing into uncomfortable areas and areas of, frankly, some things so dark that I've done shows where I've almost melted down while I'm doing them. But I started in this leg of the journey begins in 2003 when I went on shortwave radio out of a broadcast group in Oregon. I did a show called The Threshing Floor from 2003 to right around the end of 2011. That was a Christian show. It was based around extensive research into Christianity and biblical prophecy and end times and all of the, crash and burn wild stuff that modern day Christianity goes into. And by the end of that series, I had pretty much renounced everything I believed about the way Christianity was presented. I had pretty much dumped my religion. I had become a Gnostic and also realized that there was something else I needed to deal with. I had a show called Exotica, which Emily referenced earlier. Exotica was actually the property of the network that I was broadcasting for. And I took that show, which was an occasional show. It had multiple hosts, and I began doing it. And when some of the first shows that I did were with Duncan O'Finian, who was at that time very active in disclosing about Project MKUltra and mind control. And as I delved into this, plus the areas of ufology, ET contact, abduction, I began to hit a resonance pattern that was a little bit more than just research. It was part of my story too. And I was aware of a lot of this, even going into it, but it was somewhat suppressed. And it was suppressed in some very interesting ways that as I went through the journey, I began, like Emily, to feel a little bit almost therapeutic about talking about these things, however dark they are. And they bring you into a place of connection, sometimes very uncomfortably with your own experiences. So from 2000, let's see, so where are we here? We take Exotica. I did Exotica for about maybe a half a year, and I parted company with the network because obviously my programming no longer aligned with their programming. Isn't it interesting? We use the term programming. So my programming diverged. It was not an acrimonious split. I still have a great respect for, this was Christian Media Network, which is out of Oregon. It's James Lloyd. In a lot of ways, James was a mentor to me. He took a risk. He put me on the air and frankly dropped a lot of money because we were running 2 shortwave channels crisscrossing the United States from Canada to Mexico from 2003 to 2005. And then we went streaming as shortwave became unstable due to a number of factors, not the least which was, as we would find out later, the aerosolization and particleization of the upper atmosphere, which began interfering with shortwave bandwidth. So I morphed it into off-planet radio. The original show was to be called Off-World Radio, and anybody out there who recognizes where that comes from, I couldn't get the domain for it, so I settled for Off-Planet Radio, and it's just it's stuck. I mean, in a lot of ways it fits, and in a lot of ways now it feels almost kind of kishy, but it's an identity, and it's the place where we kind of built a platform on. So the show's morphed a lot over the years. It's gone through a number of permutations. Emily joined me 2 years ago after we had kind of, in interesting kind of ways, Emily and I kind of danced around each other for a number of years, and then we really connected and began to compare stories and realized how similar we were and yet how different we were and how that complementary aspect could theoretically work chemistry in terms of on-air personalities, because I've had female co-hosts over the years. I worked with a woman named Sue Patterson when I did the Threshing Floor. And earlier in Off-Planet Radio, I had a lady named Chris Holly, who is a reporter, journalist, and actually an abductee and part of what I believe was my labs. And Chris worked with me until she got seriously ill. She's quite ill and could no longer continue doing it. So Emily was the addition that kind of brought us to the current version, which I think is the ultimate version of what we're doing now.
Now, co-hosting sometimes can be tricky, right? I know myself that I would probably not be very good at co-hosting. I have to have my own show because I'm able to control the content and the editing and all of that stuff. So how does it work with you guys? Does the dynamic work well? I mean, have you divided up roles and responsibilities?
First off, if it wasn't for Emily, I'm not certain I would be doing this right now. Because at the point where I brought Emily in, I was fatigued. I was tired. I was really ready to give up. And having somebody to divide labor with and somebody who brought new concepts, a new voice, a new energy was a blessing. And it also reinvigorated me and gave me a new sense of purpose and mission to do this.
Yeah, because it's a lot of work. I was talking about this with Freeman. The show just went up today, and you know, a lot of the discussion was around the fact that to put these shows together, it takes a lot of work, and it's a lot of energy, and it's time consuming, and I think a lot of people are not really understanding of that. You do get to points where sometimes you think to yourself, oh, is this more work than it's really worth after a while? And then you start having the thoughts about whether, you know, you're really reaching anybody or if you're talking to yourself, you know. But it's good if you guys can work it out, and it seems like you have. And like you said, Randy, bringing somebody else in that basically can reignite that flame, that spark, that's a good thing.
Well, one of the aspects is that Emily, we kind of shore up each other's strengths and weaknesses, and there's not a lot of weaknesses. We're very different people. We have very different energies, and we approach things very differently, but our goals are the same. And I think we almost speak with one voice in terms of the message that we put out. Creatively, I have done a lot over the last 15 years. I mean, we're now talking, this is 2018. I've been doing this since 2003. I've worked in multiple media formats. I've been on networks. I've done live shows. I've done podcasts. I've had a chance to feel my way around it from just about every level. And as you pointed out, this is a lot of work. To put a show up, to have some level of professionalism means that somebody's got to be the video editor. Somebody's got to do the audio editing, the audio engineering, put the nuts and bolts together. And that's me. That's what I do. The artwork, the graphics, the website design, things like that. Whereas what Emily has brought to the table is being able to work the human side of this in a way that I never did, nor could, nor frankly would, although I've been drug reluctantly towards it. Being able to connect with people is really, really something that's very important. And she's extremely good at this. She's gifted at it. And she kind of humanizes my aspect, which is basically to keep people at an arm's length. And I don't say that because I don't like people. I say it because I'm basically an introvert, an extreme introvert. You know, and people don't get that. They go, but you do radio, you do TV, you do public speaking. And I'm like, you know, there's a compartmentalization that goes on with, and I think this is true with a lot of us that do this type of media. Left to my own devices, I'm looking at the guitars on the back of your wall right now. I have a wall like that in another room with guitars, keyboards, and recording equipment. I just go doodle with my instruments, which means that nobody would ever hear of me because I'm not that good a musician. But doing this, we create something very unique with our voices and our minds, and having somebody to work with me at this point was really a blessing.
That's interesting that you should say that, Randy, because I'm also introverted myself, and people don't get that.
No.
So when it comes up, they say the same thing to me, but you do a radio show and write music. So how could you possibly be introverted? And, you know, it takes effort to do it. It doesn't come naturally to me. I actually have to make, you know, an effort to put myself out there and to think about how I'm going to present and how I'm going to approach things. Because like you, left to my own devices, I will be back here playing music and doing something else, and I will be perfectly happy and satisfied to do that. But there is an inner calling that I know that I have that continues to surface. So every time I want to take a step back and say, well, you know what, I think I'm going to give this a break and I'm going to go do this inner sense within me comes through and says, right, it says, hold on a second. You could still do that, but you still have to do this.
You can't not do this now.
Right.
You see,
right.
And that's the thing that a lot of people don't understand. Because of some health issues, took a break in 2013 for nearly 6 months. And that was a point where I was deeply reconsidering because I was very sick. It took me a long time to recover. And I was like, you know, I nearly died from this. I need to stop and reconsider where my energies are going. And there was that inner voice that kept pulling me back and pulling me back to the point where I'm going, I need to get back into the game. I need to do this. There's more that needs to come out. And whatever our roles are, I like the idea of the inner calling. There's a reason, there's something that impels us to communicate. Because I think communication is such a rare gift that people who do it, and you do it very well on your show, I think we do a pretty good job on ours, and there's a number of people who are gifted at this. These are things that are life missions, and they feel like they're like ancillary to what we call our normal life, our work jobs, our hobbies, our avocations, but in fact, this probably is the top level thing that we do. Everything else is designed to kind of position us in a place to speak into the public consciousness, whether you have a YouTube channel with 200 listeners or you have 250,000 listeners and viewers, you are permeating the fabric of human consciousness by speaking and activating energies into it, of bringing forward consciousness and ideas and aspects that need to be communicated.
Now, you guys get into some very, very heavy topics, and a lot of channels they don't get into. It's not knocking them. It's just that it's not their forte, and it's not places where they go, but you guys go there, and which I think is fantastic, because I like that too. I love to dig into areas where it is extremely intriguing, and you have to process through and try to connect dots, and some of it, as you mentioned, Emily, it can get dark. And Randy, you said the same thing. It can get dark, and I guess there's a certain makeup of a person that understands that where I'm going, that rabbit hole could be very deep and very dark, but I'm going to go there anyway because I want to know and I want to understand. So one of the things I wanted to jump into here is artificial intelligence, because that's one of those areas where people talk about it, but they talk about it at a very superficial level, in my view, many times. And I'm not talking about everybody, but many times it doesn't really get below the surface. I'd like to get your perspectives on artificial intelligence and what is it exactly? I mean, what do you think it is? Is it here today? And what does it look like potentially as we move forward into the future?
You want me to go first, Randy, or you want to just, okay, I'll go first.
Emily,
So first
go
of all,
ahead.
I just want to throw in there that I will not be impressed with artificial intelligence until not only is it washing my dishes, but putting them away in their proper places. Because I hate putting the dishes away, right? So that's when I'll be impressed with it. So I was just thinking as you were saying that on some level, all intelligence is artificial, because intelligence is something learned, right? And a lot of things that are learned are coming from a teacher or a history book or whatever. And that can all be programmed or revised or whatever, which is different than your own internal knowingness. Now, I'm not saying that because I think we should not act to gather intelligence and become more, I'm not saying that, but there is a difference between something learned and something known, right? Something learned can become something you know, but on a certain level, all intelligence can be artificial. I think artificial intelligence, as we think about it, on a certain level has always been here. And this ties into some things, concerning like simulation theory, or are we in some kind of containment system? And so I think that, maybe at one time it was more of a biological or an organic kind of technology. And as it has progressed, or depends on how you look at it, maybe regressed, it has become more mechanized and more about machines, or more about, making that machine smaller and without any organic qualities to them, without any humanity to them. And so it's something that we're more, because it's starting to look so mechanical, we're now able to identify it in a way that we couldn't before, because it was at a more organic or biological state before. So I sometimes catch myself wondering, is this just what happens? Is each new iteration or advancement in any kind of technology just more mechanized, and it's just almost what humans are compelled to do, is to do that? And is that something that we need to try and pull back from? Or is it something that we just need to have a certain level of understanding of and awareness about, so that we don't let certain aspects of our most inner selves become intertwined with it? That makes sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I was going to add that the whole advent of technology, right, is that mechanical aspect of it, where humans are actually adopting the AI because of their infatuation with technology and automation. And that's what I think most people, the vast majority of people, do not understand, is that I call it being AI'd. They are being AI'd, artificial intelligence, right? So when they watch science fiction or science shows on television and they're saying, oh, you're going to have a robot that's going to wash your dishes and mow your lawn, The robot is you.
Yep.
Right. So that's how I kind of, the perspective I put it into is that humans themselves have been artificially intelligenced, and to the degree where they actually defend the AI. Right.
Yeah.
So when you question certain things like the business that we're in, we question a lot of stuff. So if you go to the average person and you start to ask them questions, or you engage in a conversation with them, and they hear something that they don't like or they don't agree with, or something that basically makes them short circuit, they become very defensive. They can become very belligerent. To me, that's basically defending the artificial intelligence, right? It's try to keep the status quo.
Even in the process of this, let's go back one more step and I was trying to find a online dictionary, but my browser froze up, so we won't go there. We've got to define what we think intelligence is, and why is there this cultural worship of this thing called intelligence? One of the earliest touchstones that I had into how intelligence agency operations conducted Project Talent, which goes back to the mid to late 1950s and was actually the gateway into Project MKUltra and other ancillary projects, of which there are documentably hundreds of sub-projects and probably thousands beyond that, was the use of intelligence quotient testing, IQ, in public education. And we have been led to believe that somehow or another this is a signifier of superior humans, that they score well in a particular battery of tests where they basically score you in things that are core skills applicable to life and suitable for being educated inside of the system's structure. So those who do well with an IQ test are then rated and placed and selected and processed in the human machine we call the education system. Interestingly enough, almost everybody that I have ever talked to about induction into covert programs has indicated that they had extraordinary testing done on them, one of which was always geared towards IQ and placement in terms of intellectual capacity and abilities that relate to the strata, the spectrum of what we call intelligence. In fact, what they were also doing is they were also profiling for things that weren't intelligence at all, but were actually extraordinary in the sense of what they were looking for in terms of paranormal and extra sensory type skills as well. But back to the issue at hand, this whole IQ spectrum has led us to believe that somehow we need to constantly scale our, quote, intelligence, our capabilities, and the way to do that is through outside means. So education is basically induction of knowledge, skills, procedures, methodologies, whereas we possess within us another type of intelligence that's actually the wisdom of the soul and the skills of the soul and the spiritual spectrum of things that are suppressed in favor of this externalization. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, no, it makes perfect sense.
Okay.
I think you did a better job of saying what I was trying to say when I said all intelligence is sort of artificial.
It is artificial. No, you said it beautifully. You said it perfectly. Yeah. I probably used way too many words to get there, but I wanted people to understand this is not a natural process. This is not who you are. It's your, quote, intelligence score. And Emily knows this because we've talked a lot. I tested extremely high. I had this verified by a friend of mine it was my best friend until age 11. We went to school together. We were best friends. And both of us scored in the 170s of IQ. Now, please.
Nerd.
This is not a source of pride to me at all. This is actually a source of a lot of grief, because when you tested that high, they began to profile you for other things. So intelligence is a marker of something, but what it really is it's a marker for programmability of how they're going to hook into you. And so we have to consider that intelligence is an aspect of profiling. So now we're led to believe that we can be more than we, quote, are through education. And we're led to believe that we need to augment that, which brings us into this modern era of technology. Because, I mean, technology goes the whole way back to Prometheus. Forward again. The Industrial Revolution was simply the first wave of mass technocracy that gave us a system that ran for about 200 years. And now we're in the next phase. We're actually at the end of the technological era. You can read Zbigniew Brzezinski on that because he wrote extensively about this era. And so we're kind of at the place where now it's going to morph a little bit. But we're also at the place where technology is no longer externalized, but now is being introduced into an internalized system where we are beginning to wear, put things in our body, conduct things through our body, and have our environment around us operating on a technological spectrum. So, in effect, what's happening is that this whole technological era, which has been machine-based, is now going stealth, and we are being pulled into the machine. The machine is no longer external. It is internalizing us, the human.
So where do you think that goes into the future, Randy or Emily? So we are swimming in technology, right? Physically, mentally, it's just we are submerged in it. Is it a grand experiment? Basically, are we just a bunch of lab rats? Or are they engaged in some transformation with an end state where they're saying, well, I know they talk about transhumanism and all that stuff, but I mean, what do you think it is? Is it just a grand experiment because they like to just to see what their toys can do? Or do you actually see it as, yeah, they like their toys, but they also have an objective in mind in the future?
I'll go first on this. So the way I see this, and the way I have seen it for years, I worked in the tech field, especially back in the 90s. I'm a database programmer. I have IT background. I did training at corporate levels for Microsoft products. I worked for a company that did Microsoft certified training. I also marketed technology through a company that's now gone called Minolta, which marketed, among cameras and copiers and other things, was marketing the first generation of digital scanners that were used to archive hard copy materials from the bookshelves and the microfiche cabinets onto the internet. The initiative to put all public information onto the internet, which began in the Clinton administration. So I have enough background and enough depth in technology. I know how it works. I've built machines. I've built networks to know that this technology was arcing towards something much bigger. And my God, I just forgot the question. What was it?
Well, the question was, are they applying the technology as essentially as an experiment because we're lab rats, or do they actually have an end state objective in mind?
Yeah.
In other words, the technology is being used to transform from point A to point B.
Yeah, Brzezinski broke this out in the technocratic era. Largely, it was to create a technocracy. This goes back before this, during the Industrial Revolution. They were dreaming of this. They were dreaming of the day when they would get this technology. The Fabians, the early societies in England, which ultimately manifested in Tavistock, were already envisioning the level of technology we would have now. And this actually goes back even further. It goes back to the court of Queen Elizabeth I and Francis Bacon and the New Atlantis, which in very colorful language portrays the technocratic era as well. This isn't new technology. None of this is new. It's very well known and very well understood what the applications of these technologies are and what the development arc of it is, because it's been done before and it was envisioned largely for this time. These are things that you have to look at it from the standpoint of how societies and cultures and civilizations are planned, because all civilizations are planned. That's not natural either. And nothing that we live in is really natural. This is a conversation I just had with my wife tonight when I was going on this tangent. But there's nothing natural about, we're organized around principles that are larger than ourselves, that are on a magnitude of scale that are inhuman. And that's not what organic humans did or would do. We would organize on levels that are tangible and scalable to the human level in a way that's interpersonal and deeply connected to both each other and to the earth itself. And so everything about what they have planned is basically designed to alienate us from our natural states as human beings, as dwellers on this earth, as beautiful, creative, soul-breathed beings with a mission, and to take us into a machine age where we simply become nothing more than computational units on a supergrid.
So,
pretty freaking dark, eh?
Yeah, no, it is dark, and the question always becomes, so why even keep people around? I mean, what at the end of the day, what's the purpose of having humans?
They don't have a choice. This is the war. This is the war of consciousness. This is what this is. However you view, now I have to say that my background as an apocalyptic Christian served me well in understanding a lot of this stuff. Yeah. There's something to be said for the ancient writings in that they were spelling something out. Do I believe that all of those were like written by God and are hardwired and this is like prophecy and it's going to happen? No. But what I will say is that there is an outline of history there that goes back hundreds of thousands of years to other civilizations on this world, and that largely what we are doing is we are reenacting the final stage of what has been a battle of the ages of the human soul consciousness versus the archontic machine AI.
Okay, so when we talk about the Archons now, so I was glad you went there. So your view, and Emily, of course you can chime in here, is the view here that humanity is being controlled and manipulated by off-world entities?
So I mean, I think it's a combination of things. And to back up a little bit to your last question, when you asked if there was an end game, if it was an experiment or if it was an end game, it's both. There's an end game, but they can't force to get there. They can't get there on their own. They need us to participate, because the difference between them and us, they're parasites, we're creators, right? They need us to host them, and they need our energy and our creativity to feed off of and to build where they want to go. And that works best if you can get us to buy into it. And so the experimental part is to see which situations they can create that will most capture our imaginations most and get us to sort of lend our energy to that. That is why you have like the stuff that Mark Devlin talks about, why they would do it with music, right? You know this, because humans are, this stirs up the passions of humans in a way that gets them to really give themselves over to it. Same with religion, right? It stirs up people's innermost part of their spiritual being and then distorts it, but it gets you to give so much of your energy and so much of your own creative ideas and force and whatever over to it. And they understand that this works best when the humans propel it forward with our own energy and our own consciousness. And to be, even more, exact with this, both in ancient Egypt or this future society, which I'm not even 100% sure aren't exactly the same thing, because I don't really believe that time exists the way we think it is. No. A lot of that technology only works if it's propelled by human consciousness, or humans' spiritual ability to activate it. Like one of the things that I have very deep instinctive memories of, and I don't know if it's past me or future me, is activating the energy systems within the pyramids by the way I danced. And some sort of energy that I was able to give off would just make the place light up and sounds happen. So it was almost like a rave or an underground dance party inside, but there's nothing plugged in. There's not, there's not speakers and cords and wires and whatever. It's almost like a certain amount of energy. There might have been people making vocal noises, and a certain amount of energy propelled achieve a certain geometry with your body, similar to like a crop circle, but a moving one kind of thing, starts making certain energies happen. And when all these energies come together in just the right way, boom, the free energy device turns on, and that allows for communication with other dimensions, other worlds, yourself in the future, yourself in the past, all of these kinds of things that they want. And they have us very well convinced that they're in control of this and they know how to get there, and they know something about it, but they can't make it work themselves. They need us to make it work. And so they have to continually find new and interesting ways to trick us into participating in their machinations, instead of realizing that they need us and we don't need them, and we should just go off and do whatever the fuck we want.
And it goes into
right?
goes into this legal area of consent as well. We can't they can't rip our souls out of us. We kind of believe that we're kind of in a reincarnation machine type thing, because we're scrubbed and then dumped back into the system again, sort of like fish that are dumped into open waters for fishing season. We're scrubbed and wiped, and we don't have any recall of previous lives. But there is innate memory, cellular memory, psychic memory that lets us navigate. We have the inner navigator. But as Emily points out, time itself is an interesting construct from the standpoint that I've actually kind of gotten to the place where I think we generate time on some level. We're having this conversation with Cliff High, which is like in a series that we're doing. And we're finding interesting correlations between time and this ability to generate fields of energy, which then goes back into quantum computing and some of the things that they're doing at CERN as well. But we can only be conquered if we give it up. Otherwise, I believe that we are on an arc right now this is not ascension in the way that people think of ascension. This is a flow. And within the stream of time that we have generated collectively as a race of people, we're now at the spill point of human destiny, because we have to cross the threshold this time. We cannot pull back. This time it will be terminated if we don't win this battle. And the battle's not going to be won by the majority of people who occupy this world. It's going to be won by a small minority of people like us, people who are speaking, people who are doing, people who are shifting consciousness. This is how we win the battle. I win the battle every time I get somebody to just stop and think about what I tell them about the use of digital technology or smart meters or Wi-Fi grids. Just enough to pull us back a little bit from the abyss and see how we're being desensitized and dehumanized by a technology that's so artificial and so toxic.
You know how you know that you're making a dent and that we do have a lot of power? And it's a very simple example. It's what they're doing with censorship of the truth movement, right? And alternative research communities. Because if we weren't making a difference, and if people weren't listening and we weren't changing minds and making people think, they would let us talk about whatever it is we want to talk about, because we weren't making a dent in anything. And the fact that they're doing what they're doing now, and it's to your point, Randy, is that they do understand that they're on the precipice, right? They're just kind of, we're both walking on this high wire, right? One of us is going to fall off, right?
Yep.
And I think that their particular situation is more precarious in a way than ours, because they have to work, not that we don't have to work hard, we have to work hard too, but think about everything they have put in place in the controlling apparatus and the controlling mechanism to try to keep this contained, to keep humanity contained, right? So I do think that what the both of you are saying rings so true to me, that humans have so much power, ability to, because we are creators, Emily, as you had said, we are creators. And so I do think we're making a difference. It's going to be a slow go. I'll tell you, I had a conversation with, on one of my shows recently, and I don't think it was with Freeman. But in any case, it had to do with, do you subscribe to that we're in a cycle? In other words, you know, the yugas, the Hindu yugas, where we have the Kali Yuga, right? So we're in what the Greeks called the Iron Age. And so we're in that phase right now. And my take on it is that we are in a transition period right now that could take hundreds of years. Okay. It's not, sometimes folks say transition. Does that mean 2 weeks? No, it doesn't mean 2 weeks. It could be, hundreds of years from now. So does that make sense to you that we're in some kind of transition period?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's formative. It's not just a transition period. It's a formative period. What we're doing now counts because it will reverberate heavily into the coming age. I'll use that term. It's kind of oblique, but yeah. Let's just assume that there's a dividing line somewhere, and we're now at the place where it's discernible. I'll tell you where it became discernible for me, and Emily and I talked about this on the show, was the eclipse last August. And what I saw in that eclipse, and this kind of goes into remote viewing and how you can interpret signs in the sky and aspects of even prophecy as well. But I firmly believe that eclipse was not a natural event, but it was significant. And they went to so much trouble to put on that show to hide what I consider to be some kind of covert operation that had to do with whatever is up there above us in the upper atmosphere that they want to keep calling space, and I insist is not space. But they gave us a hell of a show. But energetically, something occurred that day. It was so palpable. It was so real. I felt it. I tasted it. I sat there and watched it. I was emotional. I swear I have never in my life experienced the profound stillness around me for 4 hours when that eclipse was occurring. It was surreal.
Yep.
And other people remarked on it as well.
Yep.
Something happened there. Something shifted. A lot of what goes on above us is not designed to illuminate. It's designed to obfuscate. This is the whole point with geoengineering and the chemtrails and all of the effery that's going on in the skies, is they are hiding things from us. But in the course of doing that, they're also revealing certain things. So I kind of placed that as a bookmark to say, we are in an interesting moment here. And I saw that there was a transition. Like spiritually, there was a wheel that shifted. There was a momentum that was gained. And there were a fair amount of people who saw this event significantly and critically enough that it moved something inside of them, in the consciousness. And how that occurs exactly is, I've lived long enough now that I've seen significant shifts in our culture, our civilization, our people, that if I were to go back to when I was 10 or 11 years old, I would be shocked at the world I live in right now.
Yeah.
So we're on a fast track. Whatever we think time is malleable. It is elastic. It's very capable of being manipulated. It has been manipulated. And I think when we say we're on a track towards this, yes, we are. But I think time itself is sped up. And I think motion within the time frames itself is sped up. We're going profoundly fast right now.
I had a conversation with Crow 777, and I told him that, I know that somebody could make the argument that it was a long time ago, 50 years ago. I'm 59 years old. So if I go back to when I was a kid, things were very, very different. Just very, very different. And
Yeah, you and I grew up around the same era, so yeah, very different time.
So, and people could say, well, Mike, that's because you were young and you were not aware of everything that was going on. All these things existed back then too, and so on and so forth. But Randy and Emily, I understand that argument, but there is a sense that I have about 50 years ago, 40, 50, 60 years ago, where the environment, the atmosphere, the vibe, the electricity in the air was just much different. Yes, I understand that there was corruption and I understand that there was deception, but I mean, we are living in a comic book now.
Yeah.
And it's unbelievable. I tell people we are in the cartoon world. So, what are your thoughts, Emily? I mean, you are younger than me, so you're, I mean, what's your memory of what it was like going back to when you were a kid? I mean, is it the same as today, or do you sense there was a big difference?
So I'm 42, so I'm younger, but I'm not as young as some people think I am, because I guess I have a childlike personality. But yeah, there is a difference. Like it's I agree with your assessment about comic book. Like the world felt more real then. Like now I feel like I'm in like candid camera or like a stage set prop kind of thing, where like at any moment I'm going to notice the microphone coming down from above or like the camera panning or something like that.
Yeah, Alan Funn's going to come out. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I mean, I think there's some technological explanations for this, like some work for things like Alana Freeland does or whatever with ionization of the atmosphere and electrifying and, of our environment. I think that has increased and that has changed some of it. And obviously the introduction of computers and technology into our life. I think what happened is we went from living in an analog world to living in a digital world. And so
absolutely.
It's kind of like
huge.
when you compress things for CD or for MP3, it loses some of the definition and the value in order to make the file smaller, because we want to make everything smaller now, right? We make the dogs smaller. We make, the hamburgers smaller. We have sliders now. We want to make everything smaller so we can put it in our pocket or miniaturize it and whatever. But that also takes away some of like the character of it. You know what I mean? And so I think that is part of the difference. And like I think that goes on every level. Like I remember having a conversation one time with Elisa where I was explaining to her about how some of these modern drugs that people do, recreational drugs or narcotic drugs, are digital as opposed to analog. Like the old school marijuana and even like opium and heroin and cocaine that were around then were a more analog kind of drug, whereas things like crystal meth, LSD, MDMA, they have a digital quality to them. Like the experience on them has a technological feel to it, right? So everything about the past really 25 to 30 years has been the pixelation, digitalization, and smallification of reality on a certain level, right? Even when we look at the phones, like people are perfectly happy now to watch Netflix on their phone. Think about how small their reality is. When we were younger, people wanted to go to the drive-in movie theater to have like a really big screen, right? Now people will watch on their Netflix like the whole season of, Westworld in one night on their little teeny tiny phone. So even though the scenario being described in Westworld is crazy and almost hard for people to comprehend, they've shrunk it down to a size that people are willing to eat like a small meal and just digest and move on as if it's totally normal. If some of this stuff was on, was actually happening in front of us in a more realistic way, even on a stage, like we used to take in entertainment before screens came, there would be a more real sense about it. And so people would actually feel connected to it, engaged.
You had
more interested in changing it, more interested in feeling like there's something they could do to affect it, or even that they would want to. Whereas like, this thing it's just weird. It's like the complete smallerification or miniaturization. I know that sounds stupid. I did that on purpose. Miniaturization.
You just made that up.
Of reality and possibility to the point where like a person can accept that. Most people's world is now 6 by 3, 6 inches by 3 inches.
Talking about analog versus digital is very, very good.
You want to know why? You want to know why I figured that, and I've known this for a while. is because the music that I most prefer is dance music, is electronic music, right? So
Yeah.
there's always been a sense of technology to it. But just in my life, while I've been experiencing it, the parties I used to go to, the record they used to play analog records. And now everything is like not only like just CD things, but it's on MP3 files. They're like, not even using like a real record to do it. It's gone completely digital. So it just like, even though you think of dance music as already digital, there's been another like reduction even within that, just in my adult life experience, that I went through that transition. And while I can appreciate music that comes from both production techniques and both ways of playing it, there is something that was real, much more real when the records were played on vinyl than there is when somebody is just organizing the files on their computer and using a dummy record so that they're actually still using. A lot of DJs are crappy and don't even really use their skills anymore. But even the ones that use their skills, they're using basically like dummy kinds of records or things to just play digital files onto them and be able to manipulate it like they used to a record. And it really did sort of reduce the overall sort of emotional panorama of the experience, right? It condensed the experience and made it not as quite as expansive as it used to be for me, in the early years of it. And that, I think, for me, because, like to you, probably electronic music, you're just like, what the whole thing is electronic. So you don't even pay attention to it. But I've watched it happen within that, which made it even more clear to me the difference, between when it wasn't even digital at all, right? Like I could feel the difference. So I think that's where I came up with that. And this also goes to, this moves in from external experience to even within our own bodies with the kinds of foods we're consuming. And so I kind of, this analog to digital you can go a lot of places with it. So that's
matter, baby. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we can get into programmable matter, but let me just run this by you. You guys are probably going to think, Mike, you're really out there.
Oh, no.
So you were talking about the miniaturization of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I'm driving around, driving around town, running some errands, and they're just mowing all the trees down, and they're putting up strip malls and developments and everything else. Now, trees play a very integral part in oxygen, right?
Yeah.
Creation of oxygen. So I'm thinking to myself, well, they're not replacing these trees. I mean, they're putting up houses and they're putting up malls and shopping centers and everything else.
They're probably putting Gwen towers up too.
Yeah, and Gwen towers, yes. And by the way, I'll pay anybody $100 who can actually tell me they actually saw one of those go up. They just seem to materialize overnight, right? Yeah. Those towers, it's amazing. But in any case, my point being is, with the lack of oxygen, I was thinking that could actually force human beings to miniaturize and become smaller.
You got it.
It's terraforming.
You got it.
It's basically a terraform operation.
Remember your conversation with Sophia about the trees.
Yeah.
There are no forests on Earth. Talking, right? If there used to be giants, then maybe the scale of the world is still correct, but the trees used to be much bigger, and so did the people.
Yes, my shows better than me.
Yeah.
Not only that, but that's the vertical element. Think about the root structure system and think about what trees are. Trees are an energetic antenna transfer system into the earth. I mean, and they're interconnected. You want to network? The lure of mushrooms was largely that the psilocybin mushrooms were an interconnected neural network to the organic earth. Everything that has been synthesized had an organic origin. So when we talk about the internet, we're talking about a topology that actually mirrors a substrate of the earth itself.
I was even reading, and this was a couple of years back, about somebody creating a technology to try to turn trees into antennas by creating a spray paint that would electrify the tree. So it would still actually be a tree and look like it, but now you could use it as like an antenna or, for the Internet of Things kind of stuff, right? To actually try and use this spray paint to turn nature, because I think trees probably are by nature a better antenna than the ones they build, right? Yeah. So they were going to they wanted to try and do that. I mean, that somebody would come up with such a disgusting idea that let's spray paint electrification onto a tree. You know what I mean? Like, is insane. But no, I think you're right on with that. Like, I think that, they're trying to reduce the amount of water even if they're just saying there's less, whether there is less or not, just saying it, humans their mindset and their programming will fall right into that. They're trying to reduce the amount of water, and I think they're going to reduce the amount of oxygen. And he doesn't make videos anymore, And a lot of stuff he said I don't really agree with, but some of the stuff he said was genius. And I remember listening to that guy, Professor Doom, one time talk about how he felt that eventually they were going to declare both water and oxygen minerals, and therefore the government would be able to have a certain amount of control over the way that they're handled. And I agree with that. You know what I mean? And think about it. They've reduced all the other minerals we get, right? They've destroyed our soil, right, to the point where like we don't have the minerals that we need in it. And so why wouldn't they do the same thing with water and oxygen?
Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about the minerals in the soil. I tried for 2 years, 3 years. I had a guy come in to do my front lawn, and I wanted it to be done organically. Organic fertilizer, organic weed control, all that stuff, right? Guess what? It didn't work. It didn't work because everything is so corrupted. So, but as soon as they start putting their chemicals on the lawn, boom, your grass pops up. It's green, right? No weeds. But if you try to do something organically, it's becoming more and more difficult because they have contaminated the well.
Well, because the fertilizer is programmable matter, and they can then program the grass to grow.
Yeah, so maybe we should just talk about the programmable matter. No, let's talk about it because
that just occurred to me just now. I just completely made that up right now. But
that was a great segue. So we know that you're a host, see, because you segued right into it.
She did. She's the disc jockey of ideas. That was a cool mix.
All right, Emily. So let's talk about programmable matter.
So, I mean, there's people who talk about programmable matter in a lot more technological kind of way than I do, but I'm going to take it down to the most simple thing. If we're either some kind of organic technology, which I think we are, or we're being turned into technology through the things they're spraying in the ground and the kinds, and chemtrails and nanobots and Morgellons, well, there has to be some way of programming that. And I kind of, through a series of ideas that I kind of went through, landed on the idea that sugar is programmable matter. And they've been increasing the amount of sugar in our diets as the amount of minerals that we are able to consume reduces. And the sugar, I don't know if it's intention or just they were able to manipulate a situation that they created for some other reason, but sugar has all of the same properties as both crystals and computer chips. It's crystalline, it's cubic, it can hold information, and it's addictive. And so, I mean, all you have to do, there's a video we posted on our Facebook page of a kid consuming his first sugar soda pop, and then literally watch the kid change. And within minutes, he's saying, I feel like there are demons coming out of my hands. He'd never had soda pop before. His mother wouldn't allow it. His dad gave it to him. The kid drinks a sip. He goes, oh my God, this is so good. Do you see the demons coming out of my hands? Right there, right? Which I had been waiting for confirmation, and there it pretty much came. But I mean, if you really think about it, even if you go, I'm not a biblical scholar like Randy. I've never read the Bible. I know a few things, but I know that they ate the apple in the garden and then shit started to fall after that. Shit started to go all wrong after that, right? So what if the introduction to the human diet of sugar was what started our fall from spiritual, all-knowing beings to dumb mind-controlled zombies that can be programmed all the time because they have sugar in their body? And if you start looking at some of the things that are starting to be talked about in terms of technology, you hear them talk about time crystals, right? Well, sugar is crystalline and it's always in our body. What if the thing that's making us susceptible to time is too much available sugar in the body, right? Creating crystalline structures in our body. Sophia talks about the piezoelectric system in our body, right? What if we have false ones being created by sugar, right? Have you ever watched what happens? Like if you mix sugar and water, like you're going to start to burn it down, like to make a flan shell or something like that. And then you stop and it just sort of crystallizes there, but it doesn't go all the way to becoming hard. And it just, this weird crystalline structure sort of appears and whatnot. It's the same way that like crystals look inside. Crystals have been famous for being the sort of original organic technology. And it's the way computer chips, they have all these like little, time crystals and stuff in them. What if sugar is the time crystal of the body? In fact, I've gone as far as saying, what if what 5G is really a coded symbol for that we can basically control and program you if you have more than 5 grams of available sugar in your body. Now, I don't say this to like send people into a terror tailspin like that they can never ever eat anything sugar again, right? But I'll say this. My mind control issues, my programming really started to break down when I went on a diet for Candida that included eliminating all sugar from my diet. And
Yep.
stuff that had just been suspicion before became obviously true, like during when I was cleaning my diet up. And candida is very closely related to, in my opinion, because and there's, I think, plenty of facts to back this up, to Morgellons, because the same environment in the body is optimal for both things to grow and flourish and flesh. I actually think that like a lot of the Morgellon stuff is almost like a synthetic technological like version of candida. And what candida is yeast overgrowth that turns into fungus and then pokes holes in your gut lining and in structures in your body and allows parasites in, right? So yeast and fungus are basically communication systems. Those communication systems need information. What do yeast and fungus thrive on? Sugar. Sugar is a programmable matter for the information system in our bodies, whether that be an organic one, which candida seems to be, but even when you're healthy, you have some in your body. It's when it gets out of control that these seems to be bad. But is candida possibly like an early form of organic technology that was sort of introduced to humans at a certain point when sugars started to come into our body? I don't know. It's become very clear to me from where this has led me that I need to really increase my technical knowledge of nutrition. And so I'm actually going to be starting holistic nutrition school in the next few weeks so that I can really start to dismantle this, because I would love to, if I can be helpful in this way, become sort of the dietitian for our community and start to help people in our community experience with, can we make ourselves not programmable by what we put into our body? Can we? And I think a lot of us are already doing that on a certain level just because we realize certain things in the diet are bad. But can we really figure out how this works? And it came up in our series with Cliff on Time, he not knowing that I had this series of videos already. I'm four videos into a series on sugar as programmable matter that I do with Kara St. Louis.
Yeah.
He came and said, basically, well, when things started to change was in the industrial age with the introduction of coffee and sugar. So caffeine and sugar. And I said, oh, that's funny. And I told him my theory. And at first he was like, and he still sticks to this on a certain level, I don't like that terminology for it because I'm a computer programmer and that, I think of it that way. But he's had to kind of admit that I don't like the term, but there is something to that.
Look at two current trends in the health in the food stratum. Number one is the rise of these energy drinks like Red Bull, things like, I don't know. I've never had an energy drink, but I sipped one time and it was disgusting. It was so sweet and it was thick and I didn't like it. So we have the rise of these high energy drinks, which when you walk into like a convenience store or bodega or wherever you go to buy lottery tickets or something, they have gigantic lighted displays with all these energy drinks there. It's obvious they're flying off the shelves. And I know people that live on them. I know guys, especially, like guys that are on the road or people that are doing like long shift work, they're running off this stuff. And then the introduction of high fructose corn syrup into the food supply in a very stealth way, because, you were led to believe, oh, this is just another form of sugar. Well, it's another form of sugar that's been basically industrially manufactured more like a petroleum product than anything we recognize as a food product. And the level of glucose within it is like terminal compared to like normal white sugar. So we see the introduction of these products.
Which is bad enough on its own.
So we see the introduction of two hallmark products, both of them very high-moving food trends that indicate they are introducing hyper levels of sugars into our food supply, in addition to the fact that that sugar is in nearly everything that's processed in the food industry. It's everywhere. Sugar and salt, two dominant things that they have to put into food to make it taste like anything.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mike. No, I was just going to say that, the amount of sugar in our food has increased incredibly over the years at the same pace the minerals have decreased. And so I think one of the things that I think when I, for myself and also for clients I work with, when I take, when I go off of sugar or take them off of sugar, I increase the amount of minerals I intake because that helps reduce the cravings for sugar. So I've opined as far as, did we originally actually come from inside the earth where there is more mineral rich soil? And as we came to the surface, we began to start to need to eat things that contain sugar, because even things that don't have sugar, like celery or whatever, break down to a little bit of sugar. Is the existence on the surface of the earth in some way connected?
Well, isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting? You go back and you look at the Old Testament and the Bible, and the Yahweh God, who's leading the wandering Hebrews into the promised land. What's it called? The land of milk and honey. They're coming out of a desert. They're coming out of environs where they were basically, well, if you go from Eden to the promised land, you went from a place that was extravagantly built with foliage and streams and lush, verdant vegetation of all manner. And so now he's leading you from the Eden, which was the organic creation, into across the desert, the barren landscape, into a place that flows with milk and honey.
Yeah, and honey, a lot of people who don't want, so I'm kind of, and when I say I am I don't like to be anti anything, so I'm not going to say it that way. I count all things that have a sugar count as sugar, and I don't count celery as sugar, although there's some, but I count honey, maple sugar, coconut sugar, all those things, they're all sugar. Some are of slightly better origin than the other, but there's issues with all of them. Unless I'm having a cheat day or, I go out to eat at a fancy restaurant, whatever I want. But on a day-to-day basis, I don't eat any of them. If I have to have sweetener with anything, I use stevia, which has some of its own problems, but not all the same problems as some of the others. But a lot of people are like, oh no, honey is great. And it might be. I'm not far enough into my studies on all of this to be able to make a definitive statement about honey. I can make a definitive statement about sugar in general, and that nobody dies from not eating enough sugar. You know what I mean? If your blood sugar gets low.
The closer to natural structure and natural origin you get with anything, the better off you are. So whether we can argue about honey or some of the more organically occurring sugars, the fact of the matter is, once you get to the place where you're cutting down sugar cane and processing it, you're now crossed over into the chemical divide. Isn't it interesting how many wars and conflicts have been fought over sugar and sugar oriented, whether it was the sugarcane fields in Cuba or the pineapple crops in Hawaii that they fought a war over through the Dole Company. There's something there that's really critical to whatever it is they're trying to use to alter us.
So absolutely. And the thing I was going to say about honey is that one thing about bees, who create honey, is bees have a hive mind. They create hives, and they always work in unison to do what they're doing, right? And so if you look at how perfect the geometric structure is of like a beehive, right? So that's about uniformification. And one thing that's been happening to me, and this lends to simulation theory a little bit, is I've been having some things happen over the last couple of years, but really over the last year, where if I wake up suddenly, right, before the simulation expected me to, and I turn around, the reality hasn't put itself back together yet. And when it does, I see the same kind of shapes that the beehive has, right? The octagons, I see that for a second before it all blends into looking like natural reality. And so I wonder, people are often afraid of something that's already here. Have we already been living in a hive? Are we in a hive mind already? And some of us have decided we don't like hive mind. And so we're thinking we're trying to prevent it when really we're just trying to escape what's been here for quite a while.
So you woke up in the morning and basically you saw a tear in the fabric of what we call reality.
It's happened a few times now. A few different kinds of things have happened. That one has happened a number of times. And it usually happens when I wake up quickly, with a start, not sort of, come around and whatever. And it usually happens when I wake up, on my face and turn around quickly. And then it's just they say that there's something exists if you're not looking at it. Right. So it was almost like I caught it off guard, and it was oh, we better get our shit together really fast. You know what I mean? And it's also happened a few times with there's a cable TV box in my room. I don't watch TV very often, but it's there. And a few times when I've woken up in the morning and rolled over to look at what time it is, there's nothing there for about 5 seconds. And then all of a sudden I see the time, which, I'm sitting here looking at it right now. It's always on. It's not like it goes off for a few minutes and comes back on. It wasn't on yet. So, I don't know exactly what all of that stuff means. I have my certain ideas and suspicions, but when I watched, the reality put itself back together, it's always in that, And if you look around now, there's like a ton. I can't tell you how many people I see these days with tattoos of that sort of beehive kind of thing on them. I see it everywhere. It's I remember when I was exercising on my exercise trail, and I was doing sit-ups, and I had my eyes closed, and I tend to see a lot of visions on the back of my eyes, and I saw that, and I realized when
You
I
do
turned around
know
to get
that
up,
there's one on the outro to our own videos every week.
there's one on the outro to our video. But when I got up from doing sit-ups, I
Because
realized
we're going to do mind control too.
The reason why Emily, I'm very inquisitive about this is because my daughter, she's grown now, but she's very awake, and I remember her telling me a couple of months ago. She said, "Dad, I saw a tear in the fabric of reality," and she says, it was a split second. She says, "But I got a peek of what was behind the curtain."
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had experiences myself because ever since I was a kid, I don't want to say I suffered, but I experienced sleep paralysis.
Oh, me too. Me too. Totally.
Yeah,
we should do a show about it sometime.
Yeah.
And within sleep paralysis,
Yep.
I've told people, you are someplace else. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
You're someplace else. It may look like and very similar to where you think you are.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you're not where you think you are. Things could be very different, right? So that's a very strange experience. But you're saying what you said about basically seeing behind the curtain, Emily, was just struck me. It's exactly what my daughter.
If people pay attention, this is an exercise in consciousness, to be mindful of what is around you and connect to the organic as much as possible. I've had experiences where I'm out in nature and I've seen the matrix glitch, much like what you've experienced, what Emily's experienced. To me, it's more like a pixelization that occurs, and it's like out of the corner of your eye, which goes into a whole other thing that we've talked about as well, because the third eye isn't what most people think it is. But if you can train your eyes to begin to pick up that peripheral vision, you'll notice every once in a while it glitches.
Have you ever, I used to do this when I was little all the time. I would do it like in the shower sometimes or just in bed when I was bored. And I still do it sometimes when I rub my eyes. But if you rub your eyes for a little bit, what you see on the back of your eyes starts to be very digital looking and pixelated and whatever. And this is one of the things that has led me to believe that we are in some kind of simulation. We are in something. We are in some kind of simulation, and we're just starting to be like, whereas before we could only see it with our eyes closed on a certain level, now people like us are starting to become aware of it, and we're catching it. And if, I don't know what this means for us, but I think understanding how it works is really, really important. And this goes into things with our diet, and also even goes into something like cryptocurrency, right? I don't think the point for us of cryptocurrency is to make money. That's what I think they're trying to distract people with that. If we can figure out the way the blockchain, to really understand in our bodies, in our minds, the way the blockchain works, then we will understand how this reality was put together. Because my friend Randy right here remote viewed the blockchain, and he said what he saw was mechanized DNA strands. And that got me thinking that, okay, it's really, really important to, like, what if this is like our opportunity? Think of it, this is exactly what they would do. If you have an opportunity to really understand how something works, they'll always distract you with the glitzy glamour. It's glamour magic, right? So making a lot of money really quickly, like, people are not looking at the metaphysics of it. The metaphysics of cryptocurrency and the blockchain could be the way that we can understand exactly what we're in. And it is a very rare person who can come to understand something and not get distracted with these possible benefits of it that are not important. And so that's, I think, one of the things that we are sort of tasked with doing is observing this. And if you choose to participate, I'm not even sure participation is important or not, but if you participate, do so for the express purpose of understanding how it works. Don't get caught up in the money aspect of it, right? There's something there. Yeah. Even the word blockchain, our DNA is like a chain and it looks like blocks between it. We can figure out how this works. What makes it tick? What does it allow it to happen? How is it related to time? Think about it. It's so related to time because that's how they secure these, that's how they confirm the transactions and all this kind of stuff, right? Like, what would happen if there was no time? Because you have the blockchain, all this kind of stuff. I think all of these things that we're dealing with are opportunities for us to understand
Well, what you just pointed out there is important. It's becoming the observer, which means you have to move outside of the construct in order to view it accurately. So if we view time, we view a reality spectrum as our own reality. And this is what Emily and I talk about remote viewing in a slightly different way than the military remote viewers use it. It's a metaphysical operation of basically taking yourself not only outside of your own body, but transferring consciousness beyond the construct itself, momentarily long enough to be the observer. And in that moment, which could be a moment or it could be an eon, you get a snapshot of where you're at. So this is like, again, one of the things that we talk about is practicing being the observer, stepping back from the construct so you can see the glitch, looking at the structures of things because they're meaningful, and not necessarily attaching good and evil directly to it as a label, but simply looking at it and beginning to analyze the structure of things, of how they're put together, how they work, how you can deconstruct them, how you can operate outside of them. These structures are all meaningful communications, and they're highly encoded. What we have to decide is how we function within and without the matrix system itself. You know, it goes back to the Beatles song, within you, without
you.
Yeah.
I mean, what if, and I think this is, you know, where we're getting to here, if with simulation theory and things like this, what if there's another version of us, or the real us, outside of this construct, and we somehow came in here, like Avatar almost, right? Like, were we bored and we created a game to enter ourselves into, and then we like lost track of shit and we got confused and we're stuck in here now, and our highest self is outside of here, like trying to, you know, like one of the things that happens to me when I sort of go into deep meditation while I'm dancing is I sort of set up a communication system between myself and between this me and my highest self that exists outside of time, that is both the future me and the past me, and I start sort of communicating, right? I try to. What if that's what's going on here? Like, what if all of us are really at a party outside of this construct, sitting around at a coffee table, being like, dude, let's do some dumb shit. Let's like create this silly little world and let's go in there and see what happens. And we got stuck somehow. And there's a part of us still sitting out there waiting for us to come out, waiting for us to like figure out all the little breadcrumbs that we dropped for ourselves along the way and find our way back out of this. You know what I mean? And maybe the reason so many of us are drawn to the same thing is like, maybe we have, like, did we make some kind of agreement? Are we playing this game together and we're just starting to recognize each other? I mean, I can't tell you how many times
that actually is part of what's going on. This goes back to maybe about 6 years ago when I realized that a lot of what we're doing with broadcasting may not be the content so much of the information, although that's important, but it's a communications line to bring others in, to find others. Like, we're doing this show with you, and we're connecting with you, and we're connecting with your audience, some of whom we've probably scared the hell out of over the last 90 minutes. But we are actually trying to find the others, because the others are this group, this small group, that are actually the active assets in this consciousness war that we're engaged in.
Yeah, it reminds me, what was that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio? Was it Inception?
Inception, totally, yeah. Inception.
Totally.
We're living in like a combination of Inception, Fringe, Travelers, Westworld, all this kind of stuff. Like, there's elements of all these things, you know, and it's you know, I had the fortune of, you know, we don't get to meet each other in person that often, but a few weeks ago I got to meet Chris and Sheree Geo, who run Truth Frequency Radio from Beyond the Veil.
Yeah.
We had a great night together. We had fun. And when we're driving back to the hotel, Chris just all of a sudden blurts out, Emily, I feel like you're my sister. And that's what it felt like to me too. Like, it feels like we've known each other for hundreds of years, not just like literally. I've done a few shows with them. They've been on our show once. We chat on Skype once in a while, but the way we were vibing off each other in person and the way just we were so locked in with each other, this was our first like hangout session. It was crazy. You know what I mean? And so, like, you know, maybe we're just like, you know, like, were we the first people? Were we the original people here on Earth? And we somehow got scattered off and all that mess and whatever. And we're trying to find our way back to, like, you know, maybe we're still at the party in the pyramid where we're activating with our body. Like, maybe we're at the, like, I don't know. Like, Chris, like, so it's some, sometimes it feels like that to me. We're in something, whether it's like an actual physical containment system, or did we like self-propel some kind of time bubble like they do in the cartoons? And we're in there. And as soon as we figure out that's what it is and how it works, we can just pop and be back where, And then comes the question is, do we actually want to do that? Or are we really entertained and enjoying what's going on in here because we're doing this? And as much as like we are, engaged in this sort of fight against something or whatever, like I can't tell you how much really deep satisfaction and just really interesting stuff has come from all of these conversations we have with each other. Like, this is what makes life worth living. And if we didn't have this to do, it sucks that it has to be about all this crappy stuff and whatever. But I mean, these bonds that we're making and these conversations we're having, and I don't know about you, Mike, but I reach out and I talk to a lot of our listeners. I really do. I try to talk to as many people as I can, and it's awesome. It's so awesome. And it sucks that sometimes they come to me because they're like, they'll reach out to me because they're having a health problem or whatever. Like, it sucks that that's the reason we're doing that. But what comes from it is amazing. So I don't know.
Well, I think that, so maybe we can close the loop, because we started out talking about AI and we started out talking about how we all got to doing this. So the point is that we are confronted with this juggernaut called artificial intelligence, which appears that it wants to insinuate itself into everything that we are. But I'm going to be in Copenhagen this September to present a talk on AI. And I'll just tell you the takeaway right now, because it's not a secret. We're here because we are, and we connect because we are connected, and we are rewiring the human neural network on the fly at the very moment that they're trying to launch an AI assault against us. Again, it's the war of consciousness. The way we win the war is we connect with each other and we become real. We get real about this. We get angry, we get sad, we're depressed, we cry, we laugh, we tell jokes, we do silly shit, because that's what humans do. There isn't an algorithm they'll ever figure out that will be able to predict exactly how we're going to act, and it is exactly that unpredictability that's the saving grace for humans.
Yeah, I tell folks that folks that are our colleagues and that we're all working together, it's like finding your tribe,
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
At one point, you're standing out there by yourself. People think you're kooky and crazy, and you start to, even question yourself about the things that you're looking into and stuff like that, right? Yep. And then all of a sudden, what happens is you start to manifest other people into your life that start to validate that you're not crazy, okay? That the things that you're looking into and the things that you're researching are things that need to be looked into and things that need to be researched. Yes. Okay? Because the things that we're looking into, that is not the cartoon world. I've been very grateful, Emily and Randy, for, I've been doing the radio show for 4 years, the blog longer, but the radio show for a little over 4 years now. And very grateful for, one, all of my guests that I've had on the show. Just very, very smart people. And really good people. And also the listeners, the audience. And like you, Emily, I'm very accessible to folks that listen to the show. They email me, and I really do try to write back to everybody.
You do. I can attest to the fact that you write, but you get back within a very reasonable amount of time. Yeah.
It might take me a couple of days because there's a lot of stuff that comes through and stuff like that. But the reason why it's important, if you do this work, I believe that you also reciprocate and you do respond, is because those people are part of the tribe. You see? And because they don't have a radio show doesn't mean that they're not doing important work or they don't have something important to say, because they could be talking to family members and friends and so on and sharing information, sharing your shows, my shows, whatever, So it's really, I don't know. It's a crazy, crazy place. There's no question about it. It's wacky, but it's also a very good time to be here.
Yep. We agree.
Because the dichotomy, the difference between the craziness and what I believe is what we're bringing in to the picture is sanity. It's very clear for whoever wants to really look at it. If you're really objective, you could see that you've got this and you've got this. And so we're all doing, in my view, very important work. And it is hard work because, it's sometimes it does get a little heavy, and you've got the controllers trying to pull the plug on us, trying to strip us of our ability to communicate. Have you guys had any problems with, as I'm on the topic, with YouTube or?
We're bullies like you, Mike. We're bullies.
Yeah, we have.
You're bullies?
Yeah,
are you?
We got a
bullying strike.
My fellow bullies.
Yeah, we got our bullying strike, and we got our video about the Parkland shooting thing, taken down. So we moved it over to our website and to Vimeo, and we made a second one that went further into stuff. And we took a totally different angle on it than most people did. I don't know if you've seen the shows we did on it, but we got into some really weird stuff that Randy mostly found, and then we all kind of expounded on, and even, had an interview with our friend who actually used to be a student there at that high school. And it was very interesting, stuff. And that was in the second show. But yeah, no, I mean, one of the things that Randy and I have been talking about for a while, and I was actually thinking about a lot this week, like, I have a tremendous amount of experience in my life from the underground party scene as to how to create underground networks and ways of communicating and ways of making things happen, sort of in plain sight, but nobody can see them or outside of people's view. And I need to bring there is an underground quality to our show and to your show as well. Absolutely. I consider us the underground media, not the alternative media kind of thing. But I think, we need to start, really thinking along those lines that, we need to go underground in an even deeper and different way than we already are. And we need to kind of really start fortifying the networks that can support that so that we all be able to find each other when we're not able to find each other on YouTube.
Yeah, one of the things they've done is they've built these platforms like YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. There's nothing so these are platforms that are useful, but nothing is free. And I've actually said this to other broadcasters who have fallen prey to the whims of specifically YouTube in terms of censorship, which you just wake up one day and your channel's gone. It's like somebody overnight audited your site, went 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out. 300 videos gone, like Vinny Eastwood got taken down twice. So we can use these platforms. We need to be wise about this. We need to have websites. We need to network with each other. We need to share information. I project that we will ultimately be driven to the dark web at some point in order to sustain ourselves. And I've also said, hey, the day's going to come when the only thing we may be able to do is develop the sixth sense and finally start to broadcast telepathically. Because it looks to me like as AI comes in, they are going to lock down their platforms even more to prevent the leakage that comes from inconvenient truthers like us.
Yeah. Emily, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's, I think we should all be moving to, use YouTube only as almost like movie trailers, right? We can put like a 2-minute video up that say, we're talking about this over here somewhere else. But yeah, no, I think people need to really take ownership of their material, like not just have all your stuff, your videos backed up on your own computer, MP3, MP4. Don't trust. YouTube is not a storage service. You know what I mean? You're not like, they're perfectly happy to just delete all your shit and they'll keep it for their own copies, for their files, but you can't have it anymore. But I think also one of the things that this time is a really important time for is, we all do shows that circle around some similar information, but each of us have a little different take on it. And we have to really start honing in on that. And each of us do what we're really good at and what makes us uniquely special, and all work together. There's enough space for all of us who are doing this work earnestly. If each of us does the thing that we like doing and are the best at, and we can create like an underground hub or a network or whatever, and really support each other. There's no, it's not like, you have to be fans of Off Planet Radio or Sage of Quay. You know what I mean? Like
right.
It's not,
that's right.
You do something different than we do. I get inspired for some of the things I do by what you do. And I think hopefully things like that happen vice versa.
Yes.
And nobody, I think we have to remove this idea that someone owns, like this concept of like ownership of ideas. So, like if we, if you originated an idea or a concept, right? It's more important that the word gets out there and that people expound on it than that everybody, you'd be like, this is mine and my idea and only I can talk about it and whatever. We need to, the idea is if someone takes some ideas that I say and they run with it and they come up with something based on that and come back to me and ask me what I think of that, and then I can grow off of that. We really have to start expanding our perception of even the information we talk about and stop being, proprietary with this kind of stuff. We have to, they're trying, we're in a race, a consciousness war. And you don't want to be the only one to get there because it's going to be really boring and lonely if you are the only one that gets there. It's not about being the one. It's not about being the one to figure it out. It's about if you figure something out, being able to take all your friends with you. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so,
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, let me just say this has been really a fantastic discussion. I've had a lot of fun. You guys are really great to talk to. And it was very freewheeling, and it's the type of show that I love. It's just we can go wherever we want to go,
fun.
And it was a lot of fun. So we should do this more often, and and get our ideas out there and just talk about stuff. I would never have talked about my daughter's experience with the tear in the fabric, Emily, if it wasn't for the fact that you brought it up. It was one of those things like, well, who do you talk to about stuff like that, right? She could talk to me, but then who do I speak to? And and the thing is, by us having that discussion, just using that as an example, there could be other people that could step forward, right?
Yep. We're going to get 10 emails about it. Yeah,
exactly.
Yes.
So,
by doing that.
So let me just ask, Randy, any parting words or thoughts that you wanted to share before we head out?
No, I actually think we really nutshelled this thing strongly between the three of us. I'm completely gratified and satisfied with this conversation, Mike. Thanks.
Oh, you're very welcome. Emily?
Just, I totally love this. The time totally flew by, and it was just like we're having conversations with friends, and look forward to doing it again. And just hope everybody comes over and checks us out at offplanetradio.com. And we're also on Patreon if you want to support us. We're doing a split show now, so you can get the entire show there. It's patreon.com/offplanetmedia. People like any of the stuff I discussed tonight regarding programmable matter and health and diet. I'm now also available for holistic wellness and conscious lifestyle consultations. And we also have a lot of really cool stuff coming up just on our thing, where Randy will be in Copenhagen in September. And we're in the early stages of trying to plan our own event, hopefully sometime soon. And so lots of things are happening. And it was really great to talk to you. And hopefully we'll get to meet sometime and do something together, because that's so much. I've
needs to happen.
gotten over the last few months.
We're not that far away.
No, we're not.
That far away.
Over the last few months, I got to meet Kara. I got to meet Mark Devlin. I got to meet Chris and Cherie. You know what I mean? And it's been so cool to do all this. And so I think the more opportunities we can have to hang out and just vibe with each other, I think we'll find some things out that we need to know. So
Mark Devlin and I were talking about that. I was talking to Mark. He was on the show, and we spoke yesterday, and it was a great conversation with Mark too. Mark is a really good guy. He's just so genuine. And I promised him, I said, because he says, Mike, we have to get together. I said, Mark, we will. We will figure out a way where we can meet face to face.
Yeah, hanging with Mark Devlin's a lot of fun. I got to meet him.
I hung with him last week.
It's great. And Emily's met him. And he's going to be in Copenhagen. So we will figure out a way to get the tribes to converge. We need the convergence of the tribes. That's what we need.
Yeah.
All right, you guys. Look, I just want to say again, thank you so much. And and we'll do it again soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. And that concludes another Sage of Quay interview, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Links to my guests' websites and social media are listed in the show notes below. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can get to the blog by typing in sageofquayradio.blogspot.com, or simply head over to our hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.